Well, good morning. You are watching this video because we do not have services today. And there's been some snow and ice and stuff happening, so we felt that it would be wisest just to come to you via video today. A lot of other churches are making the same decision, looking out for the safety of our people, and we can't wait to gather again in person, hopefully next week. Hopefully this weather gets by us fast. But I did want to come to you this morning just to share a brief word, a brief challenge, really a word of encouragement from a psalm that I've never really preached from, but it's been such an encouragement to me. And that's Psalm 73. So I'm going to encourage you at home or wherever you're watching this from to find a Bible and to meet me in Psalm 73. I'm not going to read the entire passage, but I am going to ask you maybe to pause this video along the way and read the sections that we get to. Just want to take a few minutes to hopefully bring a word of encouragement. This psalm is written not by King David, but Asaph. Asaph was a worship leader. He was in charge of leading the singing for God's people. So he is our Pastor Dustin. And this is who wrote this. And I just want you to think through that. This was a guy who led God's people in worship, but at the same time had serious questions about what he saw around him. He even questioned if following God was worth it. I'll just be honest with you. There have been seasons in my life and my ministry where I believed God, but I didn't understand God. Where I trusted Him, but I didn't like what He was doing. And I think if we're honest, we've all been there at places. And so Psalm 73 is written by this worship leader who is a believer, who is really being honest about something I think many of us experience, but we never voice. And it's this, that sometimes following God gets confusing. And so I want to, if I could title this little devotional video today, it would be this, Finding Steady Ground in a Shaky World. And that's what Psalm 73 is all about. Have you ever had that moment? Maybe it's been this weekend when there was some ice around and you stepped out on some ice and you began to slip. And in that moment, you thought, here it goes. I'm about to lose my footing. I'm about to fall. I don't know what's about to happen. That's a terrible kind of feeling. And this is what Asaph writes about. I want to read just the first 3 verses of Psalm 73. It says this, that God is indeed good to Israel, to the pure in heart. But as for me, my feet almost slipped. My steps nearly went astray. For I envied the arrogant, and I saw the prosperity of the wicked. And so this psalm begins with a man saying, my feet almost slipped. Not physically, but spiritually. And so what we see in this psalm is a progression. I'm going to walk through that progression. It's about our eyes and our focus being first on the world, then on moving from the world to our worship, and then our focus being on God Himself. And when we progress through that, when our focus is on God rather than the things of this world, I believe that's when we receive from the Lord steady ground in the midst of a shaky world. And so first, what we see in the first 12 verses, again, I'm not going to read it. I'm going to ask you to press pause in a moment and just read those verses, 1 through 12. But what we find first is that when we focus on the world, our faith can start to slip. And so take a moment, press pause, and read verses 1 through 12. And as you come back, I just want to tell you a story. When last year, my dad and my brothers and our sons all went camping and hiking, and we were hiking along this little river, really this stream, wasn't very deep. And my brother older brother, decided it would be fun to cross the river. So he started to jump, and there was these big rocks in the middle of the river. He would have to jump from rock to rock. Again, the river wasn't very deep. And he was a little nervous, but he would jump, and then he would jump. And along the way, I would call out his name. Hey, John, hey, look at me. I got something to show you. And what I was doing was trying to distract him, because I thought it would be hilarious if he fell in the water and get all wet. And now I didn't really think about it. It also could be dangerous, but that's what brothers do. They just want to have fun. And what was I trying to do? I was trying to get his eyes off of what he needed to step on and onto something else. This is often what happens in our world. Life, the difficulty of life, the struggles of life has the tendency to make us take our eyes off of what's most important. And this is what Asaph writes. When Asaph looked around, life didn't make sense. These verses talk about the arrogant were thriving, the wicked were comfortable, and the faithful were struggling. I mean, maybe you've been there, struggled or scrolling through social media on a hard day when you've been stressed with bills and work and kids and just life, and you're stressed. Then you look and see, looks like everybody else has their life together. Their kids are all perfect. They got family pictures. They got promotions, all of this. And you start thinking, am I doing something wrong? Is this all worth it? I think for Asaph in these verses and for us, comparison is what he was doing, leads to confusion, and jealousy leads to doubt. And he admits in verse 2 that my feet almost slipped. It almost gave way. I almost fell. But then notice the second progression here. Not only when we look at the world, our faith begins to slip, but notice secondly, that when we enter God's presence, our perspective begins to change. Now I want you again just to pause the video for a moment. Read verses 13 through 17. I'll give you a moment. Press pause, 13 through 17. What these verses say is that when we enter God's presence, our perspective begins to change. Everything shifts in verse 17. He says all these things, and then he says in verse 17, until I entered the sanctuary of God. He's basically saying, man, this was my thought process. I was worried. I was mad. I was angry until I began to worship the Lord. I mean, that's something beautiful that happens. Worship didn't change his circumstances. Things were still the same, but it changed his understanding. It changed his perspective. I remember when my wife and I went to Utah and we hiked Angel's Landing, and we saw it from the bottom. We saw everything around us before we started the hike, and it was beautiful. But then we climbed the mountain, and we got up through the trails, and we trekked all the way. We made it to the summit there at Angel's Landing, and things looked different at the top. Nothing really changed. The mountains were there, the valleys were there, but the beauty was different at the top. What happened? Our perspective changed. We could see the whole picture. The landscape didn't change, but our perspective did. This is what worship does for us. This is what stepping into God's presence does for us. I believe that worship lifts us high enough to see what God is doing. And so in God's presence, confusion can give way to clarity, and fear can give way to peace. And then I believe doubt will begin to give way to trust. And so whatever you're walking through, man, I would just challenge you to give the Lord time to help you see with His eyes, His understanding, His perspective. Ask the Lord to give you eyes to see what He's doing in the midst of your circumstances. And the final progression we see in these last verses is this, that when we cling to God, we discover a love that will never let us go. So I just invite you to pause the video and read verses 18 through 28, through the end of the chapter. And remember this statement: when we cling to God, we discover a love that will never let us go. This is where I hope we all find ourselves. When a storm comes at our house, sometimes it can scare some of my boys, especially in the middle of the night. If the storm's happening, they want to climb in bed with us. They want to be near us. They call for mom and dad. And why is that? Because there's comfort and peace in being with your mom and your dad. I can't take the storm away. The storm doesn't stop, but they are at peace when they are with me. That's the principle that Asaph is realizing. When we cling to God, when we prioritize Him, we discover a love that will never let us go. Asaph is realizing that world success is temporary, but God's presence is eternal. And then I want you to look at I believe one of the most beautiful verses in all of Scripture. Verse 26, it says this, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." He ends this psalm not by trusting life, not by trusting circumstances, but by trusting God. You see, life is a lot like looking at a giant tapestry from the back. From the back of a tapestry, we see knots and tangles, and it looks confusing. Nothing seems connected or intentional. But when you see it from the front, there's a beautiful design. And a lot of times life is like that. From our side, from our perspective, there is confusion. But from God's perspective, there is completion. So we may not understand His methods, His timing, but we can trust His heart. So I'll close like this. Wherever you find yourself today, like Asaph, your faith may not be gone, but maybe it feels shaky. Maybe it feels unsteady. Maybe your prayers haven't stopped, but your peace has. And quietly, maybe you're thinking, God, I'm trying to follow You, but this is really hard. And I just want you to know that's an okay place to be. God welcomes our honesty. Here's the good news of Psalm 73. Even when our feet almost slip, God's hand never lets go. He gives us the steady ground to stand on in a shaky world. So God sees what you're carrying. God sees what you're facing, and God understands what you don't. And I believe this, that the same God who holds the world together is the same God who's holding you together right now. So wherever you're watching from, let your heart rest in this truth, these words that Asaph wrote. Whom have I in heaven but You? And besides You, I desire nothing on earth. So when everything feels like it's slipping, God will steady the ground and He will not let you fall. I hope that's encouraging for you today, no matter where you find yourself in the circumstance and the confusion of life, that God is with you, God sees you, God is for you, and God will lead you through. I love you. I'm grateful that you joined us online. We'll be back together again real soon. See ya.